Tēnā koe te whare, tēnā koutou te whānau paramata. Kia ora mai tātou, tēnā tātou katoa. Members, when we broke for the dinner period, we were debating the Civil Defence Emergency Management Amendment Bill. Jan Logie was speaking, and she has 6 minutes and 11 seconds remaining to speak.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying before the bells interrupted me, that there's no doubt that natural disasters are increasing around the world and in this country, and that in recent years New Zealand has been spending between $1.2 and $2 billion a year in cleaning up natural disasters in this country. And this, though it is, so this bill is dealing with those things in terms of emergency management, and it's dealing with natural disasters, though it is also dealing with issues beyond that. And a state of emergency may also be triggered by an epidemic or an actual or imminent attack or warlike act. So we are not talking exclusively natural disasters in this legislation. And as we know, though, that natural disasters, and it does seem some days when you're looking at the world, also terrorism, is increasing around the world, and clearly that our existing legislations focus on reduction and preparedness and prevention, we do need to be doing more as a society around that. We need to be building strong, interconnected communities to prevent terrorism. We need to be ensuring strong biosecurity measures at our border around public health. We need to invest in public health in this country and have strong regulations around where people are allowed to build, and put plans in place and support our councils to deal with rising sea level and flooding that we know is coming. And critically, we need to ensure we reduce our carbon emissions and take some leadership on preventing even worse climate change. We need to do much more on all of these measures. But the reality is we already have communities living in at-risk areas. And 1 degree of warming has happened, and more is already locked in. So we will have an increasing number of increasingly severe storms and droughts in this country as climate change evolves. And we also know that we live in a country with fault lines that we cannot control. There are limits to our ability to control nature and other people. So no one is arguing, especially not the Greens, about the importance of good emergency management. So this bill is focused on the recovery aspect of the 4 Rs, which is reduction, readiness, response and recovery. And specifically, the main provisions of this bill are to introduce group and local recovery managers and the requirement to put in place a recovery plan in the event of an emergency. Currently, the Act doesn't establish these roles or clarify the mandate for these people, even though they are in the plan that was put in place and agreed on, I understand, last year. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are actually a little bit behind the 8 ball on bringing this to the House, and I would have thought if there was a need for legislation, it perhaps would have happened concurrently with that decision or before locking that plan in. So existing roles and process set out in the documents that exist do not have legislative mandates. Legalising these roles intends to ensure that these people can do their jobs, and that seems a good thing. I would note as a caveat, though, that we certainly will be interested in hearing the perspectives from people at a local level, because I certainly know that in some communities where you've got really strong, good community networks, there's a possibility that a more formalised structure may override and negate those networks. We saw that happen in Littleton, where their time bank meant that they had a list of contacts for everyone in that community and list their skills and were able to jump in after the earthquake and connect and act and build community as well as being engaged in that response and recovery. And then the formal structures came in and shut those people out. And that was what I've been told from people there, not a positive experience for them. I've also seen the same in Paikakariki, where they an amazingly innovative response after flooding of matching people who were affected with those who weren't, so the people who weren't could go and deal with all the work and income and other institutions that may not necessarily be very easy to deal with, even in the best of circumstances. So I'd hate to see a system that locked out those very strong community responses. So we will be listening to hear from people to make sure that that does not do that. What this also does is allows the minister to declare a 90-day transition period after a national state of emergency and extend this for another 90 days. So the minister can override normal legislation and continue to exercise emergency powers for up to 6 months. In this legislation. And the regulatory impact statement noted that the public may see this 90-day period as too long, even if it was the most administratively efficient. So while we are certainly supporting this legislation at this stage, we will be listening very carefully to make sure that this is not another centralised Wellington attempt to impose the views of this government onto local communities. Good emergency management response utilises the knowledge and skills of communities. It does not override them. And we would hate to see any legislation that furthered that type of approach. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. I call Clayton Mitchell.